The experience of teaching in lockdown has been strange. It's taken a little while to get used to, but it's been really interesting. It's been a good challenge in terms of how do you adapt to this? How do you make the most of this opportunity? How do you make sure that you're delivering the best lessons that you can, even though the class aren't in front of you? So I've got used to it. I'd still be much happier when we're back in school and the students are back here, but I think we've made the most of the time that we've had. One of the big difficulties with remote learning like this is the lack of face-to-face contact, so not being able to see the students in front of you. It's quite a strange experience, but it makes it much more difficult to gauge whether they're understanding the ideas that I'm trying to deliver. So I've had to try and find ways of getting through to them. So things like using the chat function in Zoom, using the hands up function, getting them to do little online quizzes quickly, getting them to hand things in. Another pitfall for me, teaching a practical subject like physics, is that I've not had access to my usual practical equipment and demonstrations. So we've been improvising a little bit and trying to find things that we can do. So for example, this morning with Year 12, we did an experiment. They did the same experiment as me at home, and they had a list of equipment. So they were using plastic bottles and bits of tape and all sorts that they'd found. So we've been doing that. In terms of successes, things like handing in work online, I think has been a big success. And I've had to learn quite quickly different ways of getting students to hand in work so that I can write on my iPad and actually annotate and give them feedback and hand work back to them so that they can act on that. And I've enjoyed finding out different ways of doing that. Something else I've really liked is reusable notebook that I bought, where I can write my notes and I can upload them straight onto Google Drive in a few seconds, and so the students then have a copy of all my lesson notes really quickly. So that's something I've really enjoyed. So from remote teaching, things that I'd like to bring back into the classroom with me, I've learned an awful lot in these last few weeks about online things. So things like the school uses Google Suite, so Google Drive I've used a lot more and found ways of sharing things with students and them sharing things with me. We also use Firefly, so I've discovered lots more things in Firefly that I didn't know existed before. And my reusable notebook, I think I'm going to be using that in my lessons an awful lot. And I've also been using a visualizer a lot more, which is something I'd used a bit in the past, but I've used it a lot in my online teaching, and that's something that I want to use lots when we get back into normal learning. I think the students have coped amazingly. I think they're incredibly resilient. I think they're ready for anything, so they're willing to give anything a go. And I think it's been odd for all of us and a bit difficult for all of us, but the vast majority have just got on with it with no fuss and actually have learned an awful lot. And in our lessons, we've managed to keep up with everything that we would normally be doing at this time of year. So I think they've coped brilliantly.